Okay, so I'm talking to Kyle Reid, who is, where are you calling from? Or calling, you're not calling, we're on a meeting, it's whatever.
Right. Yeah, I'm dialing in from my home studio here in Norman, and this used to be the room where we just stashed all the stuff. But once we had three of us living in here, all day every day, we decided to spruce it up and make better use of it. So yeah, calling from the home studio here.
Cool. I like how everyone I've talked to so far, I've only done one of these with Brian,
Mhm.
which I could literally like throw a frisbee to where he's moved to from my house. And you are also not too far away. I walk by your house very often on my dog walks.
Nice.
So basically, Kyle, I'm trying to think about when we met. I know that we've known each other for at least 8 years because you played on Kid Face, and Kid Face was recorded in 2012. So I know we've known each other at least that long, but I can't like exactly recall when
That's
we entered each other's like
yeah. Well,
sphere.
Well, I've thought about this a couple of times, and so I think I remember my first exposure to you was seeing you play at the conservatory,
Oh gosh, okay.
and this must have been 2005 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it might have been when Will Norton and Zach Zeller had the
The
non.
non, yeah.
Those are some of my first exposures to shows and people around my age making music, and I thought it was so cool. So I had been a fan of yours, since then. Just I think even just during college, listened to all the recordings you had, and then I think one of my first memories of us ever actually interacting was maybe at your 23rd birthday party.
Yeah, at this is so funny that you mentioned this because with the episode that I just did with Brian, we were talking about Brian and I met at the Blue Moon, which was this very short-lived venue down in the Paseo,
Mhm.
and that was run by Tara, who was an artist in Oklahoma City, and that's whose house my 23rd birthday was at.
Yes, yes.
She apparently introduced, like, has a lot to do with me meeting people, I guess.
It's so cool. I think it's just a testament to the scene back then, and there's still a hell of a scene now, but I remember I don't think I was necessarily directly invited to your party, but my girlfriend at the time was, and I went along as a plus one. But
Nice.
there was like a song pull or something that happened at a certain point in the night, and
Yeah.
I remember getting to play one song and it just being the pinnacle of everything I could have hoped for you know um, any kind of musical involvement. So thank you.
Nice.
That was really cool.
I love that. I do remember hanging out with you that night. Now that you mentioned that, I do remember like
Hmm.
you being there. Okay, so we've known each other at least since then. Um, One of my favorite things about you is that you always seem to have like a project going on, like some sort of which I like relate to because I am also like a project oriented person. So, what is like your project right now?
Oh my gosh. I'll, I've got a couple of things that I'm juggling. I can't ever seem to focus on doing just one thing. There's times in my life where I thought that if I just did one thing with all the energy, that it might, do better. But so I juggle between a couple of things. I'm still writing and recording songs, and I've just recently tried to get a Patreon page going to release songs before they get collected and put into an EP and put out into the world. But as I finish them here at the studio, I put them on the Patreon page and people can hear it before it gets released. Um, the other thing that I think is just on the horizon of being something I'm really excited about is designing and building and programming drum machines and synthesizers. So a couple of years ago, I got into programming these little things called Arduinos. It's just a little microcontroller. It's got inputs and outputs, and you just write a code to tell it what to do. And there's all kinds of neat applications for this. Like it'll play wave files and all that. So I've for a long time been building cigar box guitars, and I haven't been doing that as much lately. But the thing now is I've been taking those same cigar boxes and putting these little circuits in it with knobs and buttons and trying to make it, make weird noises. So that's sort of, if there is an after hours for music, that's what my after hours project is these days.
Cool. And I guess I should mention Kyle. So on this record that's coming out, Kyle played pedal steel, and then he also did a bunch of programming with
Right.
his MPC, which is something weirdly that I've been like having you use on stuff for the past few
Oh
years
yeah.
with me. Like, how did you pick up, like, what was your interest in getting into the MPC?
Yeah, I think I got my first MPC when I was still living in the back of Steve Bose's studio. So that must have been, 2014 ish. And at first it was actually just Tom Waits. I'm a huge Tom Waits fan, and Tom Waits does you know a lot of different kinds of sounds. He sort of had that drunk piano ballad sound, and then in the '80s, when his wife became more involved in the production, it got weirder and cooler. And there's some of those songs where you can clearly hear it's just kind of a loop of Tom Waits like clearing his throat or something. And he's like, "Rah, rah." And I had at the same time kind of been just exposed through friends of friends to hip hop beat making, and how the whole idea, or at least to these friends, the idea of hip hop was musical collage, right? Of taking sounds from this record or that radio broadcast, or just something you record, and then mixing them all up and sequencing them into a pattern that you can then rap over, or whatever. And it just kind of occurred to me that whether or not Tom Waits actually used an MPC, a lot of those Tom Waits sounds could be reproduced with an MPC. And so I got one, and there was such a learning curve that I think I got it and failed to make it make any useful sounds for a year or two. Sold it, got a different one, same thing. I've been through maybe 3 or 4 of them. I think the one I use right now, actually, I got while I was in Austin for South by Southwest 2 years ago with John Calvin, when we went down there and somebody was selling one for cheap. And of course, I did the thing, which is, hey, can I borrow your car to go meet a stranger and give them some money for a piece of gear. But yeah, it's become this really awesome tool now that I've gotten more comfortable with it. It's something that I feel really comfortable just saying, hey, I hear this sound that might happen, and I think I know how to make it happen with this machine. So I remember in the studio, we would send out audio from the computer into the MPC and sample like your voice or sample other things, and then try to get a pattern going with that. And yeah, and I think even before that, with some of the live shows, sampling some of the background vocals or things that we unfortunately didn't have 3 or 4 Samantha Crains to actually sing it on stage. So this was a kind of workaround. But yeah, it's just a really neat tool. And they've come out with newer models since then, but I've still got the old school OG MPC 1000 for those. Happy family.
Yeah, I think the most like recognizable spot that was used on the record was on Holding to the Edge of Night, and you had sampled like my vocal and made like a rhythmic pattern out of it that goes
Right.
on like throughout the song.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's like really made that song, I think. And there was also, which I had talked to Brian about this, which was um there was this specific keyboard sound from like a Blue Nile song that we were like hunting down trying to figure out how to recreate. We couldn't do it, and you just happened to have sampled like every sound off of that keyboard and had it like programmed into it.
Right, right. That's sort of the other fun thing about the NPCs, is that it sort of switches your brain into this other way of thinking, which is, oh, that's a neat sound. I might want that later. I don't know what
Yeah.
for. It's just, and I am also a nerd about old keyboards, especially cheesy old like Casios and stuff. So every once in a while, one pops up on Craigslist or something, and I'll nab it, clean it up as best I can, sample the sounds off of it, and then sell it, down the line. But yeah, it's a fun thing to just put on my almost like my Alan Lomax hat, but for samples, and just be listening to everything and say, you know, that's a cool sound. We may be able to do something with that later, or maybe not. There's probably gigabytes worth of just random sounds that I have that who knows if I'll ever do anything with. But hopefully one day it'll be just the right sound for whatever we're working on.
Yeah, there's definitely like a field recording aspect to it, I think, just
Yeah.
like getting sounds. Um, so what about pedal steel? Like I mean, you're like a guitar player. I mean, I don't know how you view yourself. I've always known you as like a guitar player first and foremost, like
Sure.
just like a stellar, like trained like guitar player. But like how did you get into pedal steel? Like where did that transition come
Yeah.
from?
I think it was actually the first time that I ever. So it came from playing the lap steel. So you're right. I definitely was just playing electric guitar for a long time and some acoustic guitar. But that was my identity, and what I wanted my job to be was I'm an electric guitar player. And then I think it might have been at the Kid Face sessions, but I remember it was definitely at Tiny Telephone that I think maybe John Calvin had a lap steel guitar, but I got to sit down and play something on it, and it it felt good. I liked it, and it was a cool sound. And I think I had always, maybe wanted to do that, but sort of never thought that I could manage. It always just seemed a little too hard, a little too confusing. But after that experience, I remember just getting a cheap lap steel, putting a nicer pickup in it, and then I played that for a couple of years. I remember a couple of tours we did where I'd have the lap steel over one shoulder and the electric guitar over the other, and that worked out great. I loved that. But then it was about 4 years ago, I think. I had a bicycle accident, and I broke my shoulder socket, and I couldn't play guitar for like 2 months. I couldn't play steel either, but I basically just took a break from playing, and on one of those breaks, I ended up taking a trip down to the Rattlesnake Festival in Uoka, I think.
Yeah.
We went down there, and I was basically in a sour mood, but they were like, "Hey, we're gonna go get drunk at a Rattlesnake Festival. You want to come?" And I was, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I remember we did, and I ended up falling asleep in the booth of like a little beer bar, listening to this classic country band playing, and there was this adorable like 80-year-old man with a pedal steel guitar who was just such a badass. He was just playing stuff that to my ears elevated the song in this really beautiful way. And that was sort of the moment where I was like, oh man, I want to level up and do what that guy's doing. So trying to put it on more and more stuff, and just trying to take opportunities to play it. And you and Carter Sampson, I think, have been the most generous as far as just allowing me to do that. Maybe at various times when I probably wasn't as good as I've gotten, and there's miles to go as far as becoming that adorable old man at the beer bar. But it's been a really great process over the last 4 years to remember that moment of broken shoulder, drunk in a small town, watching this guy play and saying, man, I wish I could do that too. Now I get to do that. And I remember the single came out, an Echo, right? And I remember playing steel on that and listening to it, enough time had passed that I had kind of forgotten exactly like what I had played or how it felt, and just listening to it being like, I like that. I think that sounds cool.
Good.
It's a really good feeling. Hmm.
Cool. Awesome. Kyle Reid, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, The Third Man.
I don't think I've seen that.
Gosh, it's so good. It's what's his name? Orson Welles,
Oh, okay.
set in post-war Vienna. And it's just a very visually stunning thing. You could watch it without sound, like no dialogue, and still just,
Nice.
wow, that's amazing.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I probably will do that
I think it's
today, even.
free on archive.org too, if you
Nice.
right there. Mhm.
Okay, favorite book.
Ooh, probably have to be Titans, or Sirens of Titan, the Kurt Vonnegut
Yep.
book. Yeah, good
Cool.
stuff.
I just had a thought. Probably is the reason why you like The Third Man is because you like to watch it on silent and make soundtracks for it.
You've caught me. Yeah, I
Yes.
have to let it play and then sit down at the piano or something and be like dun 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 dun.
Yeah, it sounds like something you would do.
Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, what is aesthetically your favorite decade?
Ooh, oh, that's a great question. I like that. Um, oh man, that's a tough one though. I think it would probably. I think I would have said if you had asked me a year or two ago, I probably would have said the 20s or 30s as far as like musical aesthetic and also just some fashion or architectural aesthetic, but more and more the 80s are creeping up on me. I think it's because when I was a kid coming into my sense of what was cool, the 80s were on their way out, and so everything was that sounded 80s or felt 80s, I was like, that's not cool. But then just nerding out about the music and how they made it and stuff like that, it's starting to creep back up on me, so I think I'm going to go with the 80s for today.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kyle, and good job on like the quality of your sound and video is like excellent.
You don't know how happy that makes me because I'm sure you understand, with all this stuff going on, everyone's been scrambling to figure out, well, how do I do these calls? How do I do a live stream, for all this stuff? And I've definitely had some stress, sweat, and, cried myself to sleep some nights over, my video quality. So this is appreciated.
Well, cry no more. It looks great.
All right.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm going to stop recording now, but thanks for doing this. And then